our intros on this one then, right? I've been doing odds and you're doing evens.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
And I think that works. You're kind of moderating, interviewing, or whatever. That works well for you to do the intro here. A formal intro plan, I don't know.
We'll get it figured out eventually. So, all
Yeah.
right, you ready?
Yep.
Greetings, gamers. This is Jerod Leupold getting ready for another episode. We don't have a name for this yet, but we're thinking about Will and Jerod make a new game. I'm Jerod Leupold. I am the owner, I guess, and distributor of Paroxysm by Design, tabletop role-playing games and other fiction. And with me today, as always, I've got Will Lentz.
Hey y'all, I'm here from Gamenomicon.
And today we are working together on this podcast. Because, like I said, we are working on a new game that's based on something very important here that just went into SRD, I think, recently. And we are going to be talking about the tension engine that the new game is going to be based off of. And this is one of Will's brainchilds, yeah?
Yeah, sure enough. So, short story. It is the system that powers my very first game. First thing Gamenomicon published, Party First. So, that game is very much geared toward kind of cinematic pulp horror. So the SRD here tries to boil that down to a very basic rule set that should be a good starting point for different projects, and list some options and things we've come up with that you could potentially plug and play to do some different things, or you can feel free to tweak however you want. The whole SRD document is Creative Commons CC BY 4.0 licensed. So what that means is everything in that document is totally open licensed for you to do whatever you want. Hack, slash, copy, paste, whatever, reuse, remix. All you got to do is give a little credit blurb saying, hey, it's based on this SRD by Will, Lentz, and Gamenomicon. So.
And this is phenomenal. How this one is going to be kind of structured for this episode, it's going to be a little bit more of like an interviewing. It takes me back to my old school roots of doing that back in the day. So one of the things that I'll have to ask, that we're just going to review the system and why we want to work with it so much, is why do the SRD, just real quick? Philosophically, it's not something you have to do as a game designer. But so why did you do it?
Yeah, no, it's not something that's required by any means, but it's something that has become increasingly popular in these circles and in like kind of narrative storytelling circles, right? The first one I'm widely acquainted with, well, aside of course from the D&D 3.5 OGL, which led to Pathfinder and all that stuff, and a big hoopla over the summer when Wizards went to tweak that license. The first big one other than that I really ran into was Powered by the Apocalypse, and of course people that kind of liked that particular style of storytelling, of kind of genre emulation, then became very open to do their own. Right. Yeah, Jerod's got Blades in the Dark there. Like that, then Powered by the Apocalypse then became so popular because people were able, I mean, like the way copyright works, right? Like you can already kind of dig in and tweak, reuse mechanics and whatever from anywhere. And people do that all the time, but it needs rewritten in your own words, rephrased. It needs to clearly not just be using what the way it was stated in the other product, but an SRD with an open license of some form anyway just lowers that barrier of work so that you can just be like, hey, I really enjoy this thing. I want to do my own spin, and I've got the skeleton already that I don't have to do all the work setting up. It's right here. I can add, delete a little bit, rephrase. I don't have to. Maybe it's got some extra guidance in the document about how or why, certain knobs or switches might be flipped in certain situations. And like Jared's holding up Blades in the Dark just now, that some of these SRDs have become like hooked people's imagination so much that people took that system then and tweaked it enough to their own liking that it became a new thing that more people liked and wanted to tweak. So like you wind up with Forged in the Dark that was kind of heavily inspired by that, but is big enough to kind of, or different enough to stand on its own. You wind up with No Dice, No Masters, or Belonging Outside Belonging, depending on the name you want to use. And geez, I feel like there's another big one or two kind of from Carved in Brindlewood. Really, I think was kind of out of that same family tree, so to speak. So like you can see if a little bit of traction happens, these things can spread and people start doing really cool stuff. And I enjoy seeing really cool stuff. And a couple people, somebody had asked a very long time ago about the Party First system, but also more recently, Jerod, who's done a lot of work with Party First supplements and stuff, has said some things off and on about tweaking this, that, or the other. And bingo, I thought, let's just throw the whole thing out there and see what kind of cool things people can do. I did another SRD a couple years back called the Second Guess system. That's for solo journaling games, and it is not the most popular one by any means. But we've done a few jams on Itch that have gotten some games. I know the annual one-page RPG jam has gotten several entries based on it. So it's been super cool and like really edifying to see other people put their own spins on it. And I'm super psyched and pumped to see other people do stuff, hopefully with the Tension engine.
Yeah, just to give a shout out to the second guess system, just want to let you know that the Fear and Loathing on the college campus campaign trail,
Oh yeah, yeah.
it ended up being my second most downloaded game so far already. So a lot of people
Oh
took a
wow.
liking to it. So yeah, I hope the second guess system is getting a little bit more traction, hopefully. So, but
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome.
we're here to talk about Tension Engine. I've got it set up here, system resource documents right here in front of us. First, tell us where can you get it?
That's available in 3 different places right now. Should be 4 probably by the end of the day. I actually forgot to upload it to the Gamenomicon website. I'm going to fix that today.
I noticed
It's
that
also
notice like right
available.
before this.
Yeah, yeah. Jared was trying to find it to download it, and whoops, sorry about that. So it's available on DriveThruRPG. It's available on itch.io, and it's available on the Fari Games, the Fari community website for anybody that follows all of Renee's stuff. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly out loud. I'm sorry, RP. I normally only interact with you online through text. So if you happen to catch this and I've butchered your name, I apologize. But anyway, he runs a great site and a virtual tabletop. Does kind of collates a ton of SRDs for different systems. So yeah, go check that out. Just in a general sense, there's a lot of great content there.
All right, perfect. So that's where you can get it. So let's talk about what the system is in and of itself. Now, from my understanding, I get to talk just for a little bit on here because you'll be doing the bulk of it for sure. What the one by tension is a D6 pool system. Is that right?
Yeah, D6, kind of a combo pool and roll and keep. I think some of these definitions can get a little fuzzy. I think
Yes.
I've mostly switched to calling it roll and keep whenever I'm trying to describe it in kind of tweet size text. But you are probably rolling a noticeable pool of D6s.
Yep. Perfect. So I'm just going to go down the system here. We've kind of broke it down into some different areas, and we're just going to take a look at it. So let's start off by taking a look at the game itself. Well, I guess we've kind of talked about that already. It's a roll D6. It's a
Yeah,
tabletop role-playing game. Okay, perfect. That looks good.
yeah,
All right,
we're we're working our way down through the SRD. If listeners or viewers want to follow with us, is how we're kind
let's
of structuring that.
let's jump right into then the character creation. We kind of broke this down into three different spots, and this is the basis of the game, like everything that your character can do. So can you walk us through that here, starting with attributes?
Yeah, yeah. So there's a few pieces of what you'll be doing to put together your character in kind of the base game. So um, some of the early options are things that are pretty generic, like your overall plan, picking out a class and whatever, and then that brings you to your attributes, which are something that's very common in most role playing games. It's going to break down different kind of inherent aspects of your character and their capabilities. So by default, we kind of split that up into body and mental, and then kind of split each of those into two more. And let me make sure that I am listing them properly from the SRD and not just rattling off the party first ones, because I tried to make them generic for the SRD. So you kind of split the body stuff into vigor and yeah. This is what I get for bouncing back here to these terms and speaking before reading. So vigor then is your physical capabilities, your vitality, your health, your strength, whatever, kind of as a combo thing. Comprehension then is your mental acuity, maybe intelligence, wisdom type of stuff. Presence is a more social aspect, so that probably is closer to charisma for folks familiar with that type of thing. And discipline is your character's kind of emotional core and their fortitude there. So those are the inherent stats to your character, kind of the baseline. Everything starts with at least 2 there. You're probably tweaking some up or down based on classes or different character creation steps for the specific game you're doing. But by default, they all start at 2, so that you're at least rolling some dice for any action.
And that's something I want to point out there. So your attributes give you the base number of dice that you're rolling for your pool. So your attribute's going to range between 2 and 5 at the point of creation, and I think you cap it at 5, which I think is
Right.
probably smart. Taking a look at how the numbers work out. And so you got to break down a door. You're going to be using your physical attribute, whatever you name it. That's how many d6s you get to roll, right? So
Right.
that's your base pool that you start with. Now the secondary part is skills. Can you talk about those real quick?
Yeah, so skills then are the particular aptitude that your character has from their kind of life situation and experience, right? So let's use some of the terms here. So like athletics, for instance, in Jerod's example with the door, right? If your character is their storyline, their background, their class, whatever it might be for this game, maybe they're an Olympic athlete, right? So they have an inherent amount of vigor that is kind of, I guess, their their baseline aptitude, right? That their body has kind of provided, but they've also spent years honing it, training it, expanding it, working it to its limits. So they have pushed their athletics skill much higher than someone else, maybe that had the same initial vigor score had. So if you're trying to bust down that door, then you are very possibly picking, because you're picking a attribute and a skill as a pair in order to accomplish something, and that's determining the whole pool that you roll. So to kick down that door, you're probably picking vigor and your athletics. So if you're this Olympic level athlete, maybe you've got 3 vigor and maybe 4 athletics, because that has just been your life. They also cap it at 5, much like the attributes. So you're gonna be rolling 7 dice out of that.
Yep, exactly right. So you'll be rolling 7 dice. So you take your attribute plus your skill. That's your dice pool. Now, not quite done yet. So besides role playing or anything extra that we'll talk about later, there's a third thing that your character has, and these are going to be. Oh, and also mention skills are from 0 to 5. You may not have any skill in anything, and if that's the case, then you just use your attribute base pool. Now,
Right.
yeah,
You still have some inherent basis in that, just in your like who you inherently are with your attributes, even if you've never practiced hacking a computer or whatever.
Yep. That's a great example. Like anyone, if you're set in a modern setting, and you use like hacking a computer, you just use like whatever the intellect attribute is that you've named it. Everyone can give it a shot. Some people are just going to be way better at than others. That's all, which I really like that part of the system.
Right.
So you do attribute plus your skill. That's your dice pool. Then plus you may have something extra called either an advantage or an ability. Let's talk about those.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I know this is one that Jerod wanted to put me on the spot on here. So do I go ahead and launch into that, or do you want to grill me with your question?
Well, I'll ask the question first. So you'll notice in these books is that, like if you get party first, you'll notice that there's advantages and abilities. So I was getting ready to create our new game, and I'm breaking down the character creation of something, an envisioning of something slightly different, but I still want to keep with the core ideas of what's happening here. So I got to advantages, and I'm like, okay, so you get 2 advantages and you get 2 abilities. And then I ran into a wall. What is the difference between abilities and advantages? Because they look exactly the same.
Yeah, yeah. So conceptually, in Party First, at least, abilities are tied into your class. So if you're here looking at the SRD, you're largely just going to see advantages. So the thought here is a little bit like the skills, in that anybody could have practiced their athletics or whatever, right? Similarly, when you look at advantages, let's say looking here at the SRD list, the very first example we have is careful. So anybody could be careful regardless of their background, their class, their role in the party, whatever it might be. So advantages are intended to be kind of free form abilities for you to kind of tailor and color the character a little bit more toward your specific concept. Abilities, on the other hand, are tied into that class and are largely an excuse for you to pick that class, right? Without some mechanical uniqueness to a different class, it's just background fluff. You can just make that up off the top of your head, to go along with your name and whatever when you're crafting your character. So abilities are to put it in D&D terms, right? The paladin's ability to smite would be attention engine ability. So only that class can do that. And generally, I think the the concept here is to keep those pretty minimal with tension engine classes, probably one, maybe two abilities, and allow people a lot more room to tailor how they want through skills and advantages.
Yep, and I like the difference on there because as soon as I figured that part out, then it gave me a lot more flexibility to figure out how I wanted to work on future experience points and building. Maybe take some of these, if you label them just all as advantages, and then you look at them like, okay, you know what? I only want these three or four to be available in this class. You can go through and you can add like a couple just to those classes but you can only start with one or two of them. Now, something else I really like about these advantages and these abilities is they range in power level, 100%, right?
Right.
Some
Right.
are just once an adventure or once per scene, or just something you can do all the time. That's just an inherent advantage. Super hard to balance, but I think that's what's going to be a lot of fun about playtesting, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Balancing is tough. Um, and yeah, I guess another thing you did point me toward there that we didn't expressly say is there is a meta currency in the game, which we'll get to a little bit more in some coming segments here. There's actually a couple, maybe as many as three, like Party First has. No, I swear it's not. It's not as complicated to track as that sounds off the top there. But a lot of times, these advantages or abilities are things that will cost meta currency to do. So that ties into the pool and conflict system. You're Again, I'm generalizing, so because we'll get to it more later. But you're generating meta currency during your conflicts and your dice rolls, and then spending that on advantages, like to use them during.
Yeah, stop right there, actually. So the character creation is those three things, right? Your attributes, your skills, and your abilities. That's your character. You're pretty much done at that point once you have those three things. Now, there's other pools to take in consideration. You'll get through class or whatever. And these are just kind of background stuff. Your health, right? That's just a pool that you're going to have. Like if you get down to zero health, you're dead. Or it's generally divided up between health and mental or like willpower, I think is what we have it, or what you have it in the
Yeah,
SRD.
willpower is the generic term in the SRD. So you could be, health wise, you could be physically unable to continue the adventure for some reason if your health reaches zero. Or likewise, you could be mentally incapable of continuing the adventure if your willpower reaches zero. Flavoring exactly what has happened with that. Take your pick, probably, but it's very possible for either to knock somebody out of the action.
Yep. And so along with those pools, we're now entering the next part for conflict resolution, but there's two more pools that you need to be aware of. You got your health pool, which is your physical, then you got your mental pool, which is your willpower, basically. Now you're also going to have, like Will was talking about, calling it meta currency. Let's just make it simple and say you also get what are called adventure points. The players get that. And then the game master gets something called tension or tension points. Now, before we dive too deep on those, can you just give a quick little overview of what those pools are? You've got your adventure pool, which I think you kind of talked about with your meta currency.
Yeah, yeah.
And then now, what are tension points?
Tension. So adventure points, like we kind of hit on, are the resource fueling player abilities. Tension is that as well for the GM. They can spend those points to power different effects for adversaries. But it also ties into the environment itself. This digs into conflict stuff. See, this is all interlocking, so it's hard to talk about one
Yep.
by itself entirely, but it kind of represents the growing cinematic, so to speak, tension of the environment. The classic example that I always pick with horror stuff being early in the film, you see a character get their keys out of their pocket and start their car very easily. But later in the film, while they're being chased by a horde of zombies or whatever, suddenly the scene really lingers on how difficult and how it is for them to get the keys out of their pocket, to unlock the door, to flip the ignition. So tension is both a resource pool that can be spent on that on abilities, and it represents that escalating kind of scene tension.
And to add a little bit to that, what I love about this system is the tension points for the game master, because it's another lever that the game master can pull mechanically that also narratively tells a great story for the setting. It's the reason that everyone's shoes get so slippery when they're getting chased by the bad guy, because it
Yeah.
is stressful, it's tension, they're going to fall down. And you, as the game master, can sit there like, hey, they're having a pretty good time. I've got a bunch of tension points left over. We usually make a list or something. And it's like, you know what? I'm going to spend these tension points to make this situation more difficult. And it's a fantastic part of it. And this is to the tension pool. So you got adventure points, tension points, which then nicely rolls into, like you said, the interlocking into conflict resolution. Now, there's two conflict resolutions in the game. You have the player versus the environment. So, like you were talking about, just trying to open a lock in the door, right? And then you also have versus an adversary or versus another player. And I think, what do you call that? It is conflict versus
Uh,
an
I think
adversary.
we just phrased it as adversary in the SRD. Assuming I put out a 1.1 rendition of this document before too long, that'll probably be added to clarify that could be an adversary or another player if for some reason you're in conflict with another player.
Sure. So how does this work then? How do we do conflict versus environment? So we've got all of our different pools, we've got our adventure points, we've got our tension points. How do we make this happen for a check?
Yeah. So essentially, you treat the current tension, the current level of tension, the current amount number in the pool as your target number, as your difficulty for that roll. So as the player, you're going to declare whatever your action is, like, hey, I kick down the door, to go back to our example of our Olympic athlete trying to kick down the door. Then the GM is going to take whatever the tension is right now. So let's say that's 4 right now. That's going to be their pool to roll. So they roll to see what you are doing against the environment in general. They pick the 2 they're going to keep for that. There is another step here in that they have an option to spend some of the tension resource on something. So if narratively it makes sense for this to be even more difficult in this specific situation than the overall tension would indicate, they could spend a tension point to raise their grand total by whatever the tension was to start with. So this is optional, but let's say in our example, the environment has rolled 4 dice. They get, I don't know, all 3s, we'll say, just for giggles. The GM keeps 2 3s, making the environment's total here 6. But they say, hey, you know what? Narratively speaking, this is not some creaky, half-rotten wooden door to, a long-abandoned barn that's going to be easy to kick down. Like, this is a brand new, door that was just thrown on the front door on a new house in a subdivision. I don't know. Let's say, for example, maybe it's steel reinforced, whatever, right? So there's some context that says this should be even more difficult. So the GM then could spend one of that 4 tension to raise that total of 6 by 4, the amount the tension was before they spent the point. So the grand total then becomes 10. And now as the player takes their turn rolling their dice for the pool, they know what they need to beat here. And that may color... Yeah.
Sorry, I don't want to interrupt you, but I want to clarify real quick. You said you had rolled all 3s. So when the game master spends the tension point, they keep another die to get that total to 9, not 10.
Okay. Yes. Sorry. There were. This is what I get for bouncing back to the SRD and not party first proper. Party first does allow you to choose between the two, to just raise by the total number of tension or to keep another die. The default in the SRD, Jerod did catch me, is just to keep another die.
Okay.
My bad.
Yeah, no, not a problem. And so that's something that the GM gets a nice little lever to pull. Like, I want this to be harder for the players to get. The players then take that number, just like you explained, roll their dice. Everyone always keeps 2 dice, and then they can spend adventure points to keep more of their dice. That's the basic system.
Right. And the player goes second here, so they've got a little bit of an advantage in knowing what it is they're trying to beat and deciding, do they need to spend their resource or not, or trigger some extra abilities or whatever it might be in order to succeed at that task.
Yep, which is a big deal, knowing what you have to be versus blindly going into it, which you tackle. So we've just done the environmental conflict. The next one then, so how does working a conflict versus an adversary?
So it's very, very similar, mechanically speaking. It just tweaks a little bit here, potentially about who is rolling first, who's kind of setting that difficulty here. So in an adversary case, it's going to be whoever is the initiator of whatever is happening. So if the adversary is attacking you've rounded a corner or whatever, and the zombie lurches out at you. Yeah, they are initiating. So they're going to be selecting their pool and rolling and so on first. And then you as the player react to that. But this could be flipped. Say you are confronting the local mayor over whatever, city corruption or something, and you're in his office, kind of socially confronting him and trying to turn the tables. You are probably initiating that action. So you as the player are going to be rolling first and setting that difficulty to see if the mayor is able to beat that. So player side, you're still doing this the same way, whether you're first or second, picking your attribute plus your skill, seeing what you roll, then potentially spending adventure points to keep extra dice or to trigger abilities if you really want to win at this. On the adversary side of things, this gets into things that are presented a little later in the SRD. As far as adversary stats, they're simplified compared to player characters, and they only have a couple stats that matter for this. And it's a similar break of physical or kind of mental, social type of thing. So power for something physical or dread for something intangible, we'll say. So in this example, say you are the player confronting the mayor. The mayor is probably going to take dice for however much their dread is. You know, how imposing is confronting this figure of authority, right? So say the mayor's dread is 3 or something. They're going to be rolling 3 dice for their pool to make it short and simple.
Yep. And that's it. That's the difference between doing an environment versus an adversary. The biggest thing that you have to remember is that sometimes it's easier fighting an adversary because adversaries are capped to what their power or dread is. Now, the cool thing though about adversaries is that they get cool abilities that you get to muck around with. Like one of my
Right.
favorite abilities in or features I think they're called in Party First is squamous. And then also
Uh-huh.
tentacles is probably my favorite because the game master spends a tension point or two and then combines their dread and their um, the two adversary skills together into one big hit, and
Dread
they're
and power in this
yeah,
case.
yep.
Yeah.
It's just one of my favorite ones because all of a sudden it goes from like, oh, you're fighting something to now it's doubled or triple as powerful. It's it's a shock and it's great to see the player's face, especially when you roll like 8 dice. It's never gets old, I'll be
Yeah.
honest with you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fun. And I think fitting, for the tentacle monster example, right? Like not only are those tentacles really creepy looking, but they're really strong too. So like combining those, like that kind of makes sense. One thing we did not really hit on just now, and Jerod mentioning those uh, did make me realize in the adversary case, it may be that this is combat. In the mayor example, this may be a simple kind of pass fail type of check, right? Like we get him to, we confront him over his corruption and essentially blackmail him to do a thing that we want to, I don't know, give us access to the city archives or whatever. But in a more combat oriented physical scenario, the zombie that we just stumbled into around the corner, there's probably damage that needs to go back and forth here. And so in that case, it's essentially the difference in your totals, your degree of success, right? So if as the player you're attacking the zombie here, you're the initiator. So only the initiator is doing damage here, right? That's the one that's attacking. Say your total is 9. The zombie has tried to defend against you. The zombie's total is 5. Straightforward there. The difference is 4. The zombie takes 4 damage.
Yep. And what I love about the system is that unlike some static just roll a d20 systems, um, or kind of more your binary success or not success, is that you can generate some dynamic results for the differences for social encounters or basically any sort of encounter that you want to have it be a conflict. You don't have to keep this just to combat and health. I like
Right.
that you can confront that mayor in a very organic way. You guys can go back and forth a little bit, and then until you get like the finishing point across or whatever. Is that you can
Right,
do
yeah,
that
you
through
could you
role
could
playing.
frame that as a whole social combat against his dread, trying to lower it to 0
Yep.
or lower his stamina to 0, really. But
Yep.
yeah,
I, it makes it just gives you so much more options mechanically as well as be able to do it role playing wise anyway. And that's just my own personal view on it. For I mean, I think the system's great. So that's how you work out the conflict resolutions and the scope of that you can do it in. Now we did talk about adversaries a little bit, and this is we're almost done with the main part, but we're going to get to is the tension table? Is
There
that the
is.
basic or is that a hack? No, that's an option. Okay.
It's yeah, no, the tension table is next up here after conflicts. It's kind of the next piece of more for the GM. There is one other thing that tension does or can do in the game. It represents the kind of scaling difficulty of the environment. It's a currency for the uh, the GM to use, but it also can insert some unpredictability in events. And this is, again, where you can tell the system started with horror roots. And so if the tension pool hits 10, tension breaks. Something happens. In those horror films, you've had the teens exploring the creepy haunted house, with the ominous music for the last few minutes, and nothing's there, nothing's there, nothing's there, and then suddenly, bam, something, right? And the whole time, nothing's there, and the ominous music is playing. Your tension as the viewer is getting higher and higher because you know something is going to happen. That's how these films work. Similarly, in the game, you as a player, because the GM's tension pool is public information, you can see that get higher and higher, and you know at 10 something is going to happen. Or multiples of 10, say it gets to 20 or whatever. Things get pretty wonky if you, as the GM, let it get that high. I would recommend spending and probably not going past 12 or 15 or something. And likewise, when you spend, we don't want it to be too easy to trigger. So the break does not trigger on the downward spend, right? If you've got 11 tension as the GM and you spend 1 point to go down to 10, we don't want to have it break again and be too predictable that way. But assuming it has moved upward to a multiple of 10, tension breaks, and we've got a tension table. It's a simple 6-entry table, and that the GM will roll. So it's a little uncertain even for them what item it might be that happens, but something happens. A zombie bursts through a wall. Somebody's foot falls through rotting boards in the floor. Whatever it might be, we highly suggest, like for any of the adventures we've put out for Party First, Jerod or myself, we've had a tension table tailored for that adventure with random events that kind of fit the context of things that might happen during that adventure. And it's something that I highly suggest if you're working with this system, you're sitting down to play your game or whatever. You could probably tweak any of these and run with them. The core the SRD here has a fairly generic 1 as an example that could probably work for a lot of things. But I would highly suggest folks dream up their own as the GM and have it ready to roll, so you've got an idea of directions it might go. But at least for me, I like that little fresh bit of, hey, I've prepared some things that might happen to my players, but even I'm not quite sure which one is going to happen during this tension break, and it preserves to me a little bit of that thrill even for the GM.
100%. I cannot emphasize enough how cool that tension table can be, in how it took me a while to wrap my brain around getting it focused on the adventure or mission that the players were going on. Um, so one of the books that we worked on together was called Twilight Wars. So there's a lot more spy stuff happening in that world, in those adventures. So I got to play around with, like, if they hit a tension point, like paranoia, feel like they're always being watched, someone randomly checking their papers, and you want to
Yeah.
introduce these new difficulties without giving them ways to just stop the adventure. These are just new obstacles to run into, or things to feel, to give the adventure more depth to it. Also, one of my favorite things is I had something that didn't relate to the adventure at all. And it was great because, of course, we ran into it, rolled it. Then the players were now thinking about that the whole time. Didn't derail everything, but it made them paranoid enough in their playing style. And then at the end, when I got to tell them, like, yeah, what you thought you saw didn't exist at all. It was just another added part of paranoia to the game that worked wonderfully. The tension table
Oh yeah,
really adds a lot of adventure feelings, I guess is the best way to put it. It's when I
yeah.
say it's a lot, mechanics plus setting equals the perfect way to game, in my opinion. It's what I love about this. So that's your tension tables, and then yeah, the rest of it is just taking a look at hack options. We're over a half hour, approaching 40 minutes on this. So
We
what were
are.
you think? Yeah, I mean it's a great topic. I could talk
Whew.
about this all day. Was there anything else as far as the hacks that you had on here for the SRD?
There's a variety of stuff here. Like originally the game's for one shots. There's some real basic ideas here for how to handle some advancement and experience. I know there's also some info here about maybe awarding status effects and triggering things off of those. But I know one in particular that we probably want to hit on because it's one of Jerod's favorites from Party First. We kind of decoupled it in the SRD and listed it as an option so you could plug and play. But in Party First, in this communist society, there's kind of some playing into some flavor tropes there, right? So it's got an additional layer of points here where it also splits skills up so that in the society of that game, no one is better than anyone else, right? We're all members of the party and so on. So when you have the player characters together, you wind up with party skills, which is the lowest rank in any skill that anyone in the party has. So if nobody there has trained in hacking computers or whatever, your computer skill for the party is zero. But also, if one person has trained in that and no one else has, your party skill is zero, right? They're not allowed to be better than everyone else in this particular thing that's unique about them. So this this option for the system gives players a choice whenever they go to roll. They can elect to use the party skill and be a little lower. They can hobble themselves to the level of everyone else in order to gain adventure points, as the SRD calls it, that can power them up later, or they can spend one of these adventure points in order to use their own personal skill. They can use kind of some of the goodwill they've banked in operating at the level of everyone else to shine using their own skills later when they need to. I don't know that we need to super go through it, but it also potentially tweaks how you're generating tension a little bit depending on where you go. By default, we're looking at generating tension for the GM when you roll ones, but that's another dial I think that can be tweaked depending on exactly what kind of hacks or options people want to do.
And it fits wonderfully with Party First. The whole idea is that we are the people. We're kind of muddling around along, making our party skill checks. But this also brings a very cool point too, is that when you're making your characters, I would highly suggest doing a session zero when people make characters for Party First, so that you
Oh
can
yeah.
share some. I've told my playtesters we've got three different groups that they've built. One was totally just build what you want, and then we'll figure it out later. The second one was let's share three skills or whatever you guys want to do. And so, of course, they went investigate, melee, and I forget what the third one was.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, it was melee investigate and it was either coerce or so probably socialize, I think is the one they took. And then the third party, I'm like, all right, try and break it as much as possible. So then they all took investigate at the highest possible level.
Oh,
So
wow. Okay.
they could just roll in any place they wanted to get whatever clues they wanted. That was fine.
Right.
Couldn't fight worth a darn or anything, but
Yeah.
it was
Yeah, none of them could. Nobody had the option to like stand out in that like crucial moment of fighting.
yeah,
Whoops.
oh, no, not at all. And so they had to make up the grounds for trying to get different abilities. It was a fascinating and it was a different experience for each of how the parties were made based on this party skill. It was just really cool. Another recommendation for party first. But as far as the SRD goes, that's just an optional thing. I do want to say we are going to be using something like it in the next game that we're working on. Is there anything else that you want to talk about in the SRD?
Um, no, I think that hits about everything I can think of at the moment.
All right, perfect. It's available now on what were those three places or four places?
Yeah, by the time you're checking this video or podcast out, it will be on the Gamenomicon website. Also, Drive Through, RPG, Itch, and Fari Community.
Awesome. That's
That's
fantastic.
FARI.
All right, perfect. All right. Hey, thank you so much, Will, for taking the time to go over this. And I think that wraps us up. You doing anything fun today?
Taking the day off of work. Had a couple vacation days left to burn before the end of the year, so it'll be good.
Nice. Happy holidays, everyone. Bye.